Trenton, welcome to the podcast, man.
Appreciate it, brother. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. And, before we started the podcast, before we started recording, we were talking about AI and its implications on society and a lot of potential threats that come with AI. And, you work in like with counterintelligence and all. You do have your own opinions. And we were talking about how our I know that I shared this with you that a lot of the opinions that we share may be controversial, and uh, and I just wanted to understand a little bit more of what you think about AI and the threats that come with AI in this ever changing society.
Yeah, just to start off, I'll set a foundation here where most people's opinion of AI comes from AI.
Right.
And what I mean by that, it's sort of like an echo chamber where everything that people look up about AI, or a tangential source, whether it be from Google or be from any other news
Hmm.
outlet, they're getting their information from what AI has essentially crafted new creatives to publish and produce about AI, right? And AI's own understanding about itself is from people because all it is effectively a database, right?
Right.
It's a conglomerate of pattern recognition. Well, it pulls that information, it pulls that data from what we've thought about AI in the past. So it becomes this echo chamber of how people think about AI
Yeah.
is just reinforcing their previous ignorant beliefs, right? So
Hmm.
if you talk to someone who's actively working on, I'm going to say like the spearhead of AI development, whether it be with government, whether it be a certain division in business, or even in your major sectors that are actually crafting the leading edge of AI, you're going to see that everything that they do behind the scenes is going to fall into one of these two categories. um, can you input and output, right? They treat AI essentially
Hmm.
like a Google search bar,
Right.
right? What you put in is what you get out. A little bit creative, a little bit of description, and you'll see it produce something. But where I want to take this is what I call, and it's going to piss a lot of people off, and I think that's okay with both of us,
Right. Yeah.
is there's no replacement for proper thinking, proper thought, proper creative
Hmm.
spirit, right? So while AI is a tool that will help
Hmm.
you facilitate, if you're what I call personally a second rate thinker and you're going to use that tool to create,
Hmm.
all you're going to do is create a pile of crap. It's going to be a
Yeah.
polished pile of crap. That pile of crap is going to suggest how it can maybe look slightly a little bit more appetizing for the rest of everyone else, but it's still
Hmm.
going to be a pile of crap, right?
Right. Yeah, so something that I also share with that is because AI has helped me a lot in my own work. But I also understand the threat of AI and why people are afraid of AI. And it's warranted because AI has the ability to replace a lot of the work that people do. But I'm talking about mundane work. We have a lot of data entry work that people just sit at their desk, enter the same thing. It's like desk factory workers. So AI could replace that, but when it comes to creative spaces, I don't even think that AI will ever be able to replace like artists, because a lot of the artists that we know, they're not perfect, and the imperfections is what make them great. And when it comes to AI, everything has to be perfect. It all runs on ones and zeros, right? Zeros and ones. So it understands reasoning and logic differently than a human would. So a lot
Can
of
I caveat off that just
yeah.
for a second,
Go ahead.
interrupt you?
Hmm.
Don't forget our human brain works on pattern recognition too,
Oh yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
while I absolutely agree with you, it's the mistakes that make music and dance and all of these creative endeavors beautiful. It's
Hmm.
worth exploring and engaging in, right? I'm not disagreeing with that.
Hmm.
Well, I will hold a front is that human brains operate on pattern recognition. So if a machine can do pattern recognition better, faster, and at higher quality,
Hmm.
Like, just to prove the example here is you can effectively take majority of old school music
Yeah.
and you can look at essentially seven different melodies.
Hmm.
If you can play those melodies, you can, is it this song or is it this song? 20 different songs will come to mind, right? And it's
Hmm.
those small little differences that allow you to fully see that whole new song, right? That
Hmm.
gets repeated over and over again. Like the songs from 2010 sound like the songs from 2020, which sound like the songs from 2000, right?
Yeah, because when it comes to music, there's just a few chord progressions that could make up like all of the songs that we know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, that's absolutely true. So AI and human brain are very aligned. They're very, very similar.
Mhm.
Uh, but you can't say that AI is all good or AI is all bad, because it honestly depends. And I mean, people do have the right to be afraid of AI because we just don't know what AI could do in the future. And it's just moving so fast, and people are just really not accustomed to changes. They like to understand their environment. But we also know that humans adapt pretty good to change. And we've seen that through evolution, that no matter whatever happens in society, humans adapt to the change that we experience. But yeah, I mean, also when it comes to like a bigger threat, uh, what do you see in AI? Do you see bad players using AI for, say, international terrorism? What about that?
Yeah, so you said a few different things that I want to touch on there, right?
Yeah.
So AI, just like every other human being, or how a human being will view other human beings or other things,
Hmm.
you have to understand AI is just a tool, right?
Right.
It's not bad, it's not good. It's how it's used that we impose that belief, right?
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is people view things in terms of threat versus non-threat. Is it threatening to me or is it not threatening to me?
Hmm.
There's this sort of contestation, something that we call sense making, right?
Yeah.
We have to engage with what is happening or we don't engage. That's going to make us feel safe. So those
Hmm.
people, and you see this become evident. So like you see it with the older crowd of people, maybe like somewhere around like 40, 45 or above,
Yeah.
they just don't even engage with AI unless their work demands it, right? There might have some creative aspects somewhere between like your late 20s all the way until late 30s. But the people who are under, let's say like 28, for example, they're integrating this into their lives. So what I'm
Hmm.
saying here is people will naturally either not engage because they presume that it's too much work to engage with that thing.
Hmm.
They'll engage with it, but they need to understand whether or not it's friendly or whether or not it's an enemy to them. But it's
Hmm.
just a tool. To get to your core question is
Yeah.
what about terrorists? How are they using it? So I'll reverse that lens just for a moment to
Hmm.
answer that question. In intelligence work, there's an aspect that we view data, and that is in terms of volume and pace. So the volume of data is like the amount of information or data that is being produced per second, per news cycle, whatever it is, the volume, right? So you can imagine 100 articles being published effectively like every half a second that is relevant to a certain topic, which is an
Yeah.
insane amount to believe. The next part of that is pace. So pace is the speed at which that information moves. So the news cycle used to be a month long, right? Your monthly paper way back
Hmm.
when. And then it became a weekly paper. And then it became a daily paper. And then our news cycles took over, where our news cycles became a 24-hour news cycle. But in today's age with AI, it's so easy to have a few data points, a quick recording, have it immediately transcribed and produced a left leaning source, a right leaning source, a central leaning source,
Yeah.
a radical extreme, and being able to produce that within seconds, every 20 minutes, every half hour, right? So the pace in which that volume of information is being produced is just incredible. So let's look
Uh-huh.
at it from that lens first. Now, to answer your question directly,
Mhm.
how are terrorists using it? They're able to shift influence, they're able to start tailoring recruit methods, they're able to produce through this volume and pace as it's tailored towards their recruit audience. And
Yeah.
they can specifically tailor it into certain emotions, they can tailor it into certain circumstances in a matter of seconds.
Mhm.
So where someone has their lowest low, they lost their job, they lost their spouse, they lost the things, their community that they belong to, those people are vulnerable, and they lean into getting a new community. In a matter of seconds, someone can have a tailor-made exploitation
Mhm.
for that person to just shift their ideology just a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, where as they start going down, it becomes a slippery slope. 2 months, 3 months goes by, and they don't even understand what their identity has now become because their identity has shifted to that collective of the terrorist organization.
No, yeah, what's crazy is the entire thing about bot farms, and it really came to light during the 2016 election, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
that we had a bunch of like Russian bot farms supposedly, which I think it was true, and you had a lot of bad actors, like on social media, just publishing a bunch of I guess manufactured propaganda. And also, when it comes to social media, is that everyone has an algorithm designed specifically for their beliefs, and it not only goes from what they see in their feed, but also the comments that are in the individual posts are all placed there by their own algorithm. So whenever you have something in your feed and you look at the comments, you might believe that everyone agrees with that position because they're also placed there by your own algorithm, which is really interesting because now everyone thinks that they're right. And that is so ingrained that this entire idea of confirmation bias just explodes.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that comes to mind whenever you say those things, the first thing is just because of the public, right? And I'm speaking to the public here. Why do we believe that that was the first time that Russia interfered with our election? Why do we think that was the first time that they attempted to exploit our belief systems or our networks or the social medias that we use? Why do we believe that was the first time? Because it became publicly known, but it's been happening since before the Cold War, right? That's what the Cold War was about, like influence campaigns, psychological operations, and those sort of things, right? Now, what a lot of people need to put vocabulary to so you can start using the language. There's a difference between a message and a narrative. A message is the thing that will communicate an idea that sparks the understanding of the story that everyone else adopts. And that narrative, when you understand and you create that narrative, the narrative starts taking care of itself. So what Russia's doing, what China's doing, their tactics, and all of this is publicly available information if you just go look up on counterintelligence websites. Their tactics is fan the flames,
Mm-hmm.
because what Russia and China cares about for America isn't about whether or not the right wins or the left wins or whoever wins. They don't care about that. What they really care about first is fan the flames, create chaos,
Hmm.
take advantage of that chaos. So then you can select and categorize those people who will change that vote. We can start sending messages and create a narrative that will swing that central party to a candidate that benefits that country's
Hmm.
interests, not our own.
Yeah. And also, what's crazy is that we live in a country that is so divided that now we have two parties that are just split down the middle. And that's actually a bigger threat than what any country could actually pose to the US because there's a lot of infighting, two sides just fighting each other. And basically, while doing that or doing so, they're ignoring like international threats that could happen to the US. So we're so worried about what our neighbor thinks that we just forget what threats we are facing internationally.
I think that used to be the case. If you told me that a year ago, I would agree
Hmm.
with you.
Okay.
This new candidacy, this new presidency, President Trump
Yeah.
has demonstrated month after month that that is not the case anymore, right? He set a solid foundation. You've seen that with the attack on Iran. You've seen that
Hmm.
with Venezuela, for example. You see that with the talks ongoing with the EU and NATO, right? Like you can see that everything that we have done in the past 10, 20 years,
Hmm.
there's a hard stance now that the world respects, whether you like him, you hate
Yeah.
him, it doesn't matter. The world respects because of the power that that presidency demands.
Hmm. Yeah. But that's to think that the average American is that invested into what's happening all over the world. Because I think that the average American is more focused with beating the other party than trying to be seen as number one. Because, especially when you talk about President Trump, even though now globally we're more respected than we're not, there's also a lot of people that don't like us. And I think that's also split down the middle when it comes to that. But I think overall threats are just diminished because of him being in office, right? But when it comes to the average American, I don't think they're that invested into what's happening, say, in Israel versus Gaza with Russia and Ukraine. They don't really understand those global issues. So even though they're there could still be players that are causing a threat to the U.S. But as a country, we're just so divided that we forget what the threats are. I mean, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're getting at is the
Mhm.
average American is more worried about entertainment than engagement. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is that they focused on their own internal interests
Yeah.
rather than um, their external conditions that will
Right.
affect their internal interests.
Mhm.
So I think it was is something like to the effect that the average American has like 20 plus $1,000 of debt or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
For those who have like a 4 year degree, it's somewhere around like 80 plus $1,000. It's crazy, right?
Mhm.
And I think what you're getting at there is Americans don't do complex because they don't care about complex.
Yeah.
And that's fair. That's fair. I get it. Not everyone will do that, but we're I think every American should think about like if you ever experienced like a police academy or
Mhm.
a military service or anything else that is highly indoctrinated, what you see is a culture, right? And right now, the United States is in this subliminal culture war
Yeah.
that is being those flames are being fanned
Mm.
by public medias, right?
Yeah.
The average American doesn't care, right? Think of everything in a bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
There's a hard left and a hard right. And we're starting to see a
Mm-hmm.
typical bipolarization where that bell curve is starting to separate, but it hasn't separated yet, right? We still have that somewhat of an open system, an open economic system, an open political system. And so the average American doesn't really care
Mm-hmm.
far left, far right. They care about their own interests. And I think what the core of this is something that we in intelligence have as a language here that
Mm-hmm.
we use is a perspective versus perception, right? So your
Okay.
individual perception is how you view the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's your lens. But not many people, like I think it's crazy. I would make the assumption here, like over 97 or 98% of people don't think about another person's perception. They
Yeah.
don't gain perspective. They don't shift their lens to understand a different world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're absolutely right that the average American they don't know the difference
Mm-hmm.
between Israel, a Jew versus the state Israel,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they don't understand the state versus Judaism versus a Jew, and how an Israeli can not be a Jew. Like they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand those differences. They don't understand the nuance because it doesn't affect them directly, right? And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what um, is an issue with a lot of people, mainly because their focus is 2 to 30 seconds at a time on an Instagram reel or a
Mm-hmm.
Facebook reel, right? Their attention span, I think there's research that just came out, is that their average attention span of, I think it was between a 12 and 19-year-old
Yeah.
is around 30 seconds.
That's crazy.
Past 30 seconds, you lost them and you have to restart effectively. That's like grade A dementia. It's terrible, right? It's absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, because we saw that even with Bad Bunny performing at the Super Bowl, and you had people coming out saying deport Bad Bunny, but like deport him to where? He lives in Puerto Rico, right?
I haven't seen that. I guess I should have watched the Super Bowl, but I was out working. That's crazy though.
No, yeah, and so because people just like putting people in categories or groups of people in categories,
Absolutely.
and we saw a Spanish speaking artist performing at the Super Bowl, and it's like you had two separate sides. And I was just having a conversation with a friend that he was at a Super Bowl party, and liberals were on one side and conservatives were on another side, and they're watching the Turning Point USA event that was going on. And I just asked, like, when it comes to being conservative, like, where does it? I don't even know how to put this, but how is it that that's what conservative or being conservative means, that you need to boycott a Spanish speaking artist? Like, this is where it gets kind of blurry, because in the US, how does, and I understand that it's a culture thing, but people are just so caught up in being a conservative that they think that being a conservative is about boycotting Spanish speaking artists, but also having lower taxes, being anti-abortion, that sort of thing, and it all gets piled into one. And I don't even know how to put this, because it's just a culture thing. It's not really a conservative thing. But we had a Turning Point USA Super Bowl alternative performance, and they labeled it the All American performance. But explain to me what All American means. Do you know where I'm getting at? It's like,
In part,
yeah, it's like this subtle, I wouldn't even say racism, but it's more like conform conforming to a certain culture that you don't like to accept any other culture than your own. And I understand that, but calling that all American when it does not even depict a true image of what America is, that's kind of where I'm getting at. It's that they have hijacked this whole idea that now being patriotic is like the right versions of or the right version of being woke, that you need to follow all of these certain rules, like implied rules, to be patriotic. And if you don't follow all these rules, you're not patriotic. And that's kind of what the left has done with being woke. And being woke equals being a good person. And the right has done that with being patriotic. Like, you need to do all of these things to be patriotic. Patriotic being meaning being a good person. And I've also had conversations with people that we have two sides, and I think this is what has happened, is that if you go too far right, you come out back from the other side to now being in the left. And the same thing, if you go too far left, you come back around the other side, coming from the right, if I'm making any sense here. And I think that has really captured the US. And I think that's like a big threat that has happened to us. And I don't even know what the true motivation is. If it's just a distraction from having us fighting with one another. And it's like a Trojan horse. We see a shiny object and everyone just piles onto this. So we let the real threat come in.
Yeah, you said a few different topic points there. The first one I'll say is you can see how indoctrination over ideals become reinforcement mechanisms. And those reinforcement mechanisms are by design through messaging that get propagated and created a narrative. And then they become a silo, an echo chamber to reflect those same values, those same beliefs, those same desires. And that is what just gets resold and remonetized to the same people. And so that is what's creating the polarization, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about it, it's going so far right and coming back left, or so far left and it's coming back right. It's because at the core, if you really look at it at the core, what they're really talking about is drives and desires. Every human is the same, okay? Whether or not you're from Puerto Rico, or if you're from Washington, or if you're from South Africa or Northeast Asia, like, it doesn't matter. A human brain, unless you're neural atypical, meaning like you have some sort of unique ability, right? A deviation from the norm, for the norm, right? That bell curve we were talking about, all focus on drives and desires. So the difference between a drive and a desire is a drive is renewable, right? It happens again. There's four major drivers. I won't get into them off the top of my head, but drives like sex, like fighting, like fear, right? Those things that create us to get water, to seek a healthy relationship, right? Or try to seek a relationship. Those are things are like drivers. So if you create messaging around that, it creates a narrative that's able to be amplified. So whenever you're searching for a specific desire to fill in a void, that just becomes an echo chamber that you fall into. So if I interweave this messaging that has this overarching narrative, I can start controlling your cognitive biases and start essentially stair stepping them towards where I want you to go a year from now, 2 years from now. And that's how you see people who start off center, move left, and
Mhm.
left, hard left, to now come just back onto the hard right.
Yeah, which is like really interesting because we know that Democrats were kind of like the conservatives, and Republicans were kind of like the liberals back, in Lincoln's time. And changes or politics shift, and it always happens. Where we go from here, I don't really know, because I know, especially with Trump being president, and especially when he was running for election, the first time in 2016, a lot of it has changed to how we see politicians really run their campaigns. And what we're experiencing is like a fast change, because usually changes happen pretty slow. But now within a decade, we've seen like a fast change happen. And I think that COVID kind of amplified that change, because now we're a complete different world that we were 10 years ago, when Trump first ran for office. And I think people are kind of uncomfortable with that change. And I think that's what's causing a lot of these issues as well.
So I would say look at the past, I think like 8, 12 years
Hmm.
outside of this year. You're going to see how what feels normal
Hmm.
becomes not a threat, right?
Hmm.
So we were talking about threat versus non-threat.
Yeah.
So whenever you see like a baby, let's
Hmm.
say for example, a baby who has been around white people all their life, right?
Yeah.
And for the 3 months that they've been alive, they've only seen white faces.
Right.
But then the mother, the father, whomever their caretaker takes them to a
Hmm.
place where they see a very dark brown or even black person.
Hmm.
That baby sees a threat because it's
Hmm.
not known what is normal. That
Hmm.
change of normal goes back into that sense making. Is this a threat or is it not a threat? I rather
Yeah.
just scream, cry out loud, and see someone remove this stress away from me. So whenever
Hmm.
you're talking about there's a frame that has been created this past decade,
Hmm.
the reason why things feel fast,
Yeah.
remember we're only in, what is it, like roughly a year, yeah, about a year now,
Hmm.
since Trump has become elected
Right.
and in office, should I say, more accurately. Things have felt that they
Hmm.
shifted fast because it's not a far deviation, but is a deviation that people
Hmm.
aren't used to. And that change makes it feel like that change isn't normal, right?
Hmm.
So you see this whenever, like, um, if you ever been in a relationship, like a
Hmm.
2 year, 3 year long relationship, you got used to that partner saying different things, treating you certain ways, doing certain things for you, right?
Right.
And whenever that relationship ended and you got into a new relationship, everything was kind of on edge.
Hmm.
Everything was new. You didn't know. You had to reserve what you said. Things had to change, and they had to adapt to that new system. So what the average American needs to rationalize inside their brain right now isn't the fact that things are different. The train is already moving. The American people have voted. There is 3 years remaining in office.
Hmm.
A train is moving in one direction. What the average American needs to take away from this is you need to make a choice. What choices can you make right now so when that train moves,
Hmm.
you can either stay on that train and start creating investments that benefit you by riding on that train, or get the hell off the train and leave the city, right? Because
Uh-huh.
what you're trying to build isn't that isn't moving in that direction.
Hmm.
So you can either help move it in the right direction, or you can get the hell out of the country, essentially, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And sometimes you have no other choice but to remain on the speeding train, right?
That's right.
And
So you might as well make choices that benefit you.
and I think that's what we're seeing with AI, because AI is something that people just can't avoid. It's happening. And it was going to
Mhm.
happen one way or another because that's how technology progresses. And you can't stop that because it's just a human factor of progress that things are going to happen one way or another. And I mean, they're just bound to happen. And that's true with anything with life. Some things you can't avoid because they're going to happen one way or another. And other things, you could avoid, but there's things that you need to embrace and understand how you're going to face it, because you just won't be able to avoid that thing.
Yeah. And I think what you're getting at there is hopefully what I'm about to say is going to help some people rationalize their anxiety.
Hmm.
There's something that we call the cone of uncertainty.
Hmm.
So if you ever heard of this, have you ever heard of this?
I don't think so. I feel like I have, but go ahead and explain that.
Yeah. So imagine a cone. Like I like to use a cheerleading cone example
Yeah.
because for some reason it makes me smile, right? So I want you to imagine a cone on one side that's large. It's the large opening, and it kind of
Hmm.
scales down to a narrow opening, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to imagine on the large side, it's opaque, right? It's hard to see through. And on the
Yeah.
small side, it's nearly transparent. And I want you to imagine on the large side that hundreds of different lines, strings, cables of different colors, textures, shapes,
Yeah.
thicknesses are all entering this cone. And then on the other side, where it becomes transparent, you start to see only a few pieces of
Hmm.
this cone, right? You can see a few of these strings, a few colors, a few textures. But what you're certain of
Hmm.
is when that point where that cone ends, that
Hmm.
opening stops, that one string or one cable will come out.
Yeah.
You know the color, you know the texture, you know the thickness. So, using this analogy of all the possibilities out there, of all the dangers that could happen, people start to catastrophize, they emotionally reason on the most scary looking thing that's out there, right?
Right.
They're looking at that harshly braided metallic cable that's just going to cut your hand and cut your mouth, right? It's going to be terrible. They catastrophize on it.
Hmm.
But the reality is that's could never happen.
Hmm.
Intelligence professionals don't focus on everything that's out there.
Hmm.
They focus on this very, very narrow end
Yeah.
that right before things happen, they can see two or three of these high probabilities, the likelihoods of things occurring with what they're currently observing,
Okay.
what they can currently collect on. And then they can also be informed by everything that left in the past.
Hmm.
They can see where what kind of color, what kind of thickness, what kind of angle is the string projecting? Is it
Hmm.
going in upward curve? Is it going in a downward curve? Is things staying neutral? Is it getting bigger? Is it getting smaller? Is it getting more deadly, or is it becoming more beneficial?
Hmm.
Right. So this is how I think people need to think about all of the things that create anxiety in them, that
Hmm.
creates fear in them. So when you see that business owner or that creative that is worried about all of these things in the future, don't worry about all of the things in the future. You can't control all of those, but what you
Hmm.
can do is be informed of that small, transparent part. How you can start gaining advantage and start making the right decisions because that train is moving, right? That the yarn is still moving.
Yeah.
But what you can do is hop on the right string, make sure what comes out on the other end, you're
Hmm.
informed, and then that informs your next decision.
Yeah. So why do you think people like to focus specifically on like the most worst scenario, because we hear with AI is going to kill us all, is going to displace all of our jobs. Why do you think people just like to focus on what's the worst possible scenario that could happen?
Yeah, so they emotionally catastrophize, right? It's called catastrophizing, or
Hmm.
they emotionally reason. And what that really comes down to is a few things. Um, Two things that I'll mention is one thing's called open loops. So whenever they have, I'll say this: how many things are you thinking about on your average day that is not towards your priorities for that day? Just
Mm,
think about that for a second.
yeah.
You can think of probably 10 off the top of your head. I got this to do. I have that to do. Those are all things that are taking up your cognitive bandwidth,
Hmm.
right? And because things are taking up your cognitive bandwidth, you can't focus on what you're actually doing that is productive because you have this extra cognitive load that's being demanded on your resources. So your
Yeah.
resources start to become drained. When your resources become drained, it's very easy to get irritable. It's very easy to get disfocused. It's very easy to get distracted. And whenever you're irritable, you're distracted, you're hungry, you can't really focus. It's very easy to get emotional, right?
Mm,
So one small thing that happens, it becomes an amplification, right? We were talking about volume and pace earlier.
yeah.
A little bit of volume, all saying the same thing, you don't have the resource, you don't have the bandwidth to dissect what's occurring. You don't have the
Hmm.
bandwidth to understand which string is important and what is BS, what is fake. So you start interpreting fake news, you start interpreting like things that are creating an emotional engagement as
Hmm.
truth, and that truth becomes your truth, that becomes your perception, and you're not gaining that perspective, and then you fall into those emotional traps.
So can the same be true for just having a bunch of things? Like, say that you have 10 different things that you haven't done, and then one new thing comes along, and you're super emotional on that because you still have like have these bills to pay, have these things to get done at work. Jessica from HR is being a bitch to me. Like, like everything just piles on, and uh, and when one new thing adds on to that, it just increases anxiety even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so what you're talking about there is around that cognitive load, and specifically if anyone wants to look this up, it's called extraneous load.
Hmm.
So there's three types of load. There's intrinsic load, which is the task that you're dealing with, the difficulty of that task. You have extraneous load, it's all that head trash, what we call head trash.
Hmm.
And then you have what's called germane load. Germane load is how you actually build skill, it's how you build expertise.
Hmm.
People focus on that extraneous load, and like on average, I think some studies that were done is 90+% of your cognitive bandwidth is
Yeah.
extraneous load. So
Hmm.
I want you to think just for a moment, as a creative, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's in the finance field, think about if you can remove all of that head trash, or at least
Hmm.
reduce it by 50%. How much
Hmm.
more bandwidth can you build your expertise that you can leverage against harder problems? Just imagine that for a second.
Yeah. I would assume that if you don't have all that extra bandwidth that you have to deal with, you'd be more productive at work or anything in life.
Absolutely. It is the difference between a trained and an untrained mindset whenever you
Hmm.
just become aware of those things, right?
Yeah.
So in our language, we have three forms of training. We have
Hmm.
an untrained person, we have a trained person, and we have a proficient person.
Yeah.
And in the world of Everyday Spy, what we talk about is the untrained versus the trained.
Hmm.
Simply being aware, and now you knowing that there's a different type of brain load, right? Things that
Hmm.
will create head trash. If you can learn how to reduce that, and then learn how to take that excess that you have and put it in that other gas tank, how much further faster you can achieve those things, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, you make some great points, and it's just that when it comes to focus, I think that now, especially with everything being so accessible now, it's making it harder for us to focus. And I think that's what's leading to this like short attention span.
Absolutely. And specifically, so I'll give you a framework that I probably shouldn't share with you, but I'm going to share with you anyways.
Go ahead.
So a big problem. So in Everyday Spy, I'm one of their lead instructors, and I'm one of the lead instructors in a program called Skunkworks. And inside of Skunkworks, we have a whole portion that we teach that is around this cognitive world, right? Preparing our brains to do hard work like a trained professional.
Right.
And part of this is something that we call building momentum. And building momentum is about really how can you focus on what actually matters, the tasks that will be productive. So you have two options. You only ever have two options. To do something that is productive or do something that is counterproductive towards what you're trying to achieve. If you look at everything through that lens on what actually matters here, and you filter it through what is productive for you versus what is counterproductive for you, the choice becomes very easy.
Yeah.
You don't have the soda, you don't have the fatty cake, right? You start doing the thing that you need to do, and it becomes very easy. Whenever you do the fastest thing first through that lens, you can now match the cognitive resources that you have towards the thing that matters that is also going to be productive for you, right? It becomes game changing.
Yeah, no, I agree. But, I think we're coming to an end now. But this has been a really great conversation. And I'm glad that we touched on like several different topics, because I think this is more important now than ever to just think about focusing and thinking about like what the threats are, but kind of keeping those separated, because if you're constantly thinking about everything possibly wrong that could happen in your life, you're not going to get anything done ever.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say with that, to that exact point that triggers in my mind, it's something that we call tripwires. So we have emotional tripwires, we have physical tripwires. Just like you have an alarm system at your house, we do the same thing in the professional world with our emotions, right? So just think, if you're engaging and you're scrolling on whatever social media platform that you're scrolling on, if you feel an emotion, if you feel some kind of way, a red flare should pop off. That should be your first flag on saying, that is my tripwire, that I am being manipulated right now. I'm being engaged. I'm being swayed. You can set tripwires financially. You can set tripwires emotionally. You can set tripwires in every domain. Just think about how can you incorporate something when someone enters that room without your permission, that alarm is able to go off and you're known about it, right? Simply becoming aware allows you to start gaining control, start allowing you to build an advantage that you didn't have previously.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Trenton, it was great having you on the podcast, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you, brother. It was a really good conversation.
Really great conversation. Well, thank you.